And then the next situation I found myself in was in what I've become to know as a life review. And I reviewed my life, and then I'd review every part of my life. And then at the end of my review, my awareness would be raised because now I understand spirit. And now I review all of these incidences in my life. And then my awareness would grow. And then I would go and do my life review again. And that would go over and over again because each time I went through my life review, my awareness was raised. It really was. And then I could get more and more out of my life review. Now it wasn't even like I was a voyeur. It wasn't like I could even influence what was going on. It was like I was everywhere. It really was. It was like I wasn't in one spot. Like I sensed everything as I went through my life review, and I could tell what everyone else was thinking and why they were there. And I began to realize that everybody is on their own path and people's paths intersect, maybe for a moment, maybe for a lifetime, but everyone has their own path and their own reason for being there. And that was a very important thing that I learned is that I really have to honor everybody where they are and what they're learning. They have their own path, their own things to learn. And I don't say can't judge. I don't mean that. Everybody judges, but I have to realize when making those types of judgments and situations is that everybody is on their own path, and I need to honor that. And so that was very important. And the other thing is I learned is that some of the most heartbreaking things that have happened to me in my life, some of the most challenges I've had, were the things that brought me the most bliss in those places. Because I didn't see pretty clouds or pretty flowers like everyone, like many other people see. What brought me that beauty was the feeling of bliss, because as I went through my life reviews and addressed some of these heartbreaks, some of these things, some of these terrible things that I have done, some of these terrible things that have been done to me, shame and regret is one of the things that we torture ourselves with. And once I began to do my life review and go through all of these experiences, is I would understand them. Now I can see spirit, my awareness is raised, and then all of a sudden I understood why they happened and what I learned from it. And it was liberating because it relieved the blocks, because I didn't have to put on a show for anybody or make sure, oh, I meant to do that, or, oh, it doesn't matter anymore, or I certainly can't admit to that, or that would mean, but none of that mattered anymore. I was able to really openly take a look at my life review in a beautiful, beautiful way. And I knew every time I started my life review, I knew it was going to be a bad day. I really did, because you had to face certain things. But I knew by the end of that life review that I would feel this bliss. And, I'm a glutton for bliss. I really am. So it created such an urgency for me to learn. It really does. And that's something I take in my life now. Anytime like I find some fault in myself, I almost get excited because it's like, wow, I could address that. Or if I could look back at myself and what a jerk I was 6 months ago, I'm like, yeah, because I realized I've grown from that experience. And so really what that life review taught me was how to really grow in the here and now, as well as that other place, how essential it is to remove yourself of pride and jealousy and regret, to really be able to clear those blockages so you could really learn and grow as a person. Those life reviews were very important to me. But just like I learned to see spirit, once I learned those lessons, it stopped. Once I learned all my life reviews and I wasn't growing anymore, that stopped. And then the very next experience I had was I was tested. I didn't know it was a test at the time. I believe it to be a test. And I found myself in a situation where I was in charge of some young adults, some kids, and I was teaching them to work to do a specific task. And I'd spend all this time teaching them and preparing them, and then I'd let them go, and they would scatter, and they wouldn't do anything that I said for them to do. And then I'd see them again and they'd be like, nothing's wrong. And I'd be like, what's going on? I thought we, we understood things. What happened? And I try all different ways of motivating them, like red team, blue team, whoever wins gets, they wouldn't have any of it. And then when I was at my wit's end, I stood before my higher self. And I didn't know it was my higher self at the time. But as I stood before what I later learned to be my higher self, my part of me, that I believe is always in spirit, that I believe just a portion of you comes down. I don't mean that literally, but is it incarnated to have experiences and make mistakes that your higher self can't make, and that for you to learn from those things. And by you learning from those things and sharing with your higher self, your whole spirit grows and you have a more awareness. Your awareness grows. And so as I stood before my higher self, I didn't say anything. I didn't ask any questions, but all of a sudden I felt this grace, like I could tell I've had all of these experiences that I have this knowledge and understanding from. I couldn't tell what those experiences were, but just being in that grace, it gave me a new set of eyes that I could look around, and I realized something about the children, the young adults, is that I wasn't there to teach them a skill or a task. I was there to shepherd them into their first human incarnation, that these were spirits who have yet to have a human incarnation. And it was then I learned that perhaps your spirit isn't created or doesn't exist in its current form, is that you go through many different incarnations and you have many experiences and you learn and grow from those experiences. And what I mean is that you have incarnation as different animals and different creatures, and each one has its own shtick about them and their own lack of awareness, lack of spirit. For me, the real dividing line between things is that if a creature takes care of its children, it shows it's learned empathy and it's learned certain things. And I think that escalates the understanding and the personal human growth. And what I was to do here is I was to shepherd these young children in their first human incarnation. And I was failing at that because it seemed like all this time was spent to have me learn, to raise my awareness. And when I had this opportunity to be with those kids and to see them, all I saw was dopey kids. I didn't see them as true spirits, as equals, as needing guidance. I just saw them as dopey kids. But once I learned this, everything changed. And I was able to shepherd those kids. It's very similar, like in my house where I lived in New York, we had a lot of squirrels. And I would see the squirrels romp around, and I would be like very affectionate towards the squirrels, but I could tell that they certainly weren't human. They had their own silliness about them, and often, like, I joke about it, and I call them, when I recount the stories, I call the kids squirrels because that's what they reminded me of. They were very strong and skilled in many ways, but there were some things that were just 100% missing. And I think that is why they needed that human incarnation to get those. And I believe that I think many people go through this. As you're transitioning from physical form into spiritual form, it's not a light switch. You have to go through this process of returning into spirit. And because I was so ill, my body was certain that I was going to die. And so it was bringing me through these different experiences and preparing me for that journey. And perhaps if I passed that test, perhaps I would have stayed in spirit and perhaps been able to go to whatever was next, which I believe perhaps would be a spirit guide somehow connected to people's incarnations to help guide them, not as a spirit shield to prevent them from anguish, but to share with them my awareness at critical times in their existence to help them overcome this obstacle that they're facing in life. But I failed.